Well, now it's all going to pot, whether we like it or not. Best I can tell, the world's gone to hell, and we're sure gonna miss it a lot. All of the whiskey in Lynchburg, Tennessee, just couldn't hit the spot.
Hi folks, Lauren here. So we're going to kick off the discussion on this bill. Thanks for your time, and thanks for popping by. Let's get into this right now. We'll talk more soon. Hi there, Lauren here, This Week in Weed TV and the Australia Cannabis Law Reform. And of course, shout out to the American editors over there at the Law Journal on cannabis. So an interesting bill came out a few days back. Luke Foley, the leader of the opposition in New South Wales, introduced the medical cannabis, let me get the exact right name here, Public Health Medicinal Cannabis Bill 2017. Obviously since 2014 I've been up on my soapbox. Every bill that comes out, I'm up about what's wrong with it. Sometimes I don't know if people pay attention or not, but I'll be in the weirdest, most obscure places, and some people say, oh, that's the one about this, that, the other. And it's like, oh, somebody heard something, so that's good. So this bill's very different. It actually legalizes self-grows, legalizes buying from the black market, legalizes making your own oils. It's an enabling bill, and it's really a register, but its process does things very differently than the other bills. So I need to give you a tiny bit of background on what's happened up to this point, and I'll be quick. I'll try and do this very quickly. So in 2014, Australian politicians promised medicinal cannabis for those that qualified. It was very rare conditions. I think the calculation worked on that is like 50% of 1% of 1% of the population, based on these very rare conditions. This came out of the original VL, the Victoria Law Review Commission, and they kind of set the tone. Victoria was the first to kind of get the ball rolling on some of this. So 2014, Australian politicians, because of parents with 6 kids mainly, basically promised to legalize medicinal cannabis. That was 2014. 2015, a poll came out that said 94% of the population support the use of cannabis for medicinal use. Whoa, government didn't expect that. Things got a little bit crazy. So then the next thing that happens over the next year or so, with 2015 midway to 2016 into 2017, is the government basically wanted to fulfill their obligation that they were going to offer medicinal cannabis, but they didn't want cannabis out there with THC. So what do? So basically every bill that came out, initially February of 2016, Victoria introduced 7 new laws against cannabis. Didn't call it cannabis, they called it drugs of dependence. The information is public, but it's never been disclosed to the public as these new laws that were introduced, because it was all against cannabis, never mentioned cannabis in the bill. Some people got upset over it. It basically went underneath the radar. That was 2016. Multiple bills later, effectively what's happened in every bill, the end result has been that they've redefined medicinal cannabis as being anything that is like cannabis, but it doesn't have to come from cannabis. Queensland took that a little bit further in October 2016, where they actually, in the document, and all these links are here, basically redefined synthetic opioids as cannabis. This is specifically fentanyl. So fentanyl, synthetic opioid, defined as cannabis, defined as a cannabinoid, and then cannabinoids defined as cannabis. And again, this thing sounds like conspiracy theory stuff, unless you were there watching it in the Senate, reading the bills, watching the debates. You know, it's all public record. So that pretty much is it. So the end result of all that is going into 2017, where we are today, medicinal cannabis, when it's mentioned in the media by the government, in bills and laws, on TV, and the rest of it, medicinal cannabis does not need to include cannabis. So some people are aware of this, some people aren't aware of it. There's some people that are aware of it thinking, well, every time the government produces a bill now, we know it's a lie. I'm a little bit guilty of that, because every bill that has come out has been a lie. All the information has been misinformation. through the course of these 3 years, multiple patient activist groups and those that claim to be such have their priorities have evolved. So you've got these still different groups of cannabis activists, some that want prohibition removed or nothing at all, others that I would consider realists, such as myself, that are looking at the other models around the world, what has worked and what hasn't worked. In Canada, for instance, it's not perfect. They've got a medical regime there. They're moving towards recreational. They legalized in 2001 for medical use. California legalized in 95 for medical use. California voted to legalize recreational use at the end of 2016, and Canada has done the same thing. Canada has basically taken a while to move that way. Some of the states in the U.S. have moved that way. It's still illegal federally in the U.S., and it's still illegal recreationally federally in Canada. But they sued their own government, the Canadians, for the right to be able to grow their own, the right to be able to buy who they want to be. That was in 2001. The right to be able to grow their own, they got in August of 2016. So they're in a decent place. Moving on to the next stage, and we've heard about Emory and everything in the post, in the paper, regardless of what your view is on that. He's basically pushing recreational, and he's got some good points, but also some that I disagree with. And now we have this issue between pharma, industry, CBD, and all the rest of it. CBD by itself isn't an issue. It's a flavor of cannabis if it's got over 1% THC, as far as I'm concerned. That's how it is the rest of the world. So this isn't an issue about CBD. However, CBD industry does come into it because there's a lot of bad CBD out there and a lot of people trying to offer products that aren't particularly great in the name of cannabis, either in Australia where industrial hemp used for medicine is considered medicinal cannabis. And then you've got others that are growing, which in those particular ones might not be anything but seeds and stalks and stems, and maybe even leaves and flowers as well, or it may not have leaves and flowers, and then that's another grouping. And then you have those that are growing decent CBD, we could say, where it's over 1% THC, high CBD perhaps. That's just another flavor of cannabis if you're anywhere else in the world but Australia. So that kind of sets the tone for all this. So what happened is on the 9th of March, the bill got the second reading. The reading was basically put in that the bill was going to be put in, and then there was the reading. And I encourage everybody to go through and peek at the video of the bill, of how it's received, and basically the issues that are discussed. Some of the main ones are provision of a complete defense from arrest or prosecution for the use of cannabis and possession of up to 15 grams of dry cannabis or amounts of other cannabis products, and equivalent for the administration of cannabis by the patient. I'm not going to read any more than that. That typifies a very good line of the bill. Grow your own, buy your own, black market's all right, no fear of prosecution. Supply is still an issue, but the other thing to remind you with what happened in 2016 is the Office of Drug Control, the ODC, which is a sister organization to the TGA, all sitting under the Department of Health. You got that right? Working to government. They basically defined a situation where the only people that could basically grow medicinal cannabis in Australia are for those that there is a demand for the product, legal demand. Now, with all these conditions throughout the country, remember back to the beginning, 50% of 1% of the population are the only ones that would be covered by what's available and what's legal. But then there's going to be testing prior to that. Then you've got the other folks that are allowed to have pharmaceutical cannabis, which doesn't need to have cannabis in it. And then that's a whole other grouping. The bottom line of all of that is very few people have been involved in tests, trials, or anything. Then side to all of that, you've got this issue with the TGA, where the Therapeutic Goods Administration in Australia that controls the import of drugs with now the ODC, basically they filled a loophole that basically now prevents people from being able to import anything. So you've got that on one side, but the Luke Foley bill makes that not needed to import anything because you can use domestic supply. Again, the issue is that there's no local growing of domestic supply of cannabis with THC in it because there's no conditions available for it, so there's no demand for it. What this does by default of enabling and allowing people to be defended from arrest and prosecution, is it now says, hey, there's a demand. So it changes everything. It's a real game changer. It's effectively some of what Canada sued their own government in 2001 to be able to do just that. In 2001, they sued for the right to be able to buy from whoever they wanted to without the government controlling it has to be this way. This is almost a precursor to that, saying go after it on the black market. You're fine to do that. It's not the best long-term plan, but until we address supply, which has never been addressed, which has never been looked at, then there's no other recourse to be able to do that. And I won't go much more into than that. So what I'm going to do to kind of help this along is I'm going to play this interview. So I basically got a interview with Adam Searle, who I mentioned is the author of the bill. This was also done in consideration after meeting various folks, and this is 4 years in the making. 4 years ago, there were activists that were interested in legalizing cannabis for home grows that now have more medicinal, pharmaceutical, industrial ties and links and views than they did at the time that they were perhaps using medicinal cannabis products themselves. So money has crept into this. This bill's about patient rights, and it's another reason why I and many others are quite excited about supporting it. Plus, it's very easy, and I'll talk through the bill as we go through the interview, and then you'll hear what's going on, and then I'll kind of do a wrap-up at the end. So this will make a bit more sense as we go through this. Here we go. I'm going to kick into part one now.
Hi, Laura. I'm here this week in Weed TV. I'm joined here with Adam Searle, member of Legislative Council in New South Wales. He's the author of the new Public Health Medical Cannabis Bill 2017. I really appreciate you taking the time to have a chat with me, and I'll dive right in. Obviously, you've got to go and then come back, so I'll do some editing to try and make some sense of all this.
I'll interrupt there just real quick. Basically, he was driving, he was going between meetings, he gave me the time I needed. So what he's done is he's spoken to me, and the audio quality, I need to apologize in advance for this. Being in a car, fading in and out, it's an audio editing nightmare, I promise you that. So try to do the best I can. It'll pop a little bit, very rarely. I've tried to make it a pretty good listening experience. So anyhow, we go through it. There's some bits where he'll say, I want this off the record. I'll fade out, then I'll cut back in, and then he has to leave, and then I cut back in again. So it's a bit cut up, but I think it's important to hear Adam's words on this. He spent a lot of time on this, and again, it's been 4 years in the making, and he's visited with a lot of parents of sick kids and others like Ben Oakley and Michael Oakley and those sort of folks. So here we go. We'll go right into it.
Mrs. Searle, looking at the new bill, it looks to address many new people, many new conditions, kind of different to all the other bills of 2016. Is that correct? And how do you address the current issues with that?
You could then, by regulation, add to that list to again have a situation where there is more certainty. But obviously, it's a bit of a where you leave matters for the judgment of decision makers, bureaucrats. Obviously, they have to properly inform themselves and make judgment calls, and some of them will be good, and some of them just for their necessity may not be. So
sure, no problem.
So what I've tried to do throughout the bill is, as well as having guidelines and parameters, to have flexibility.
Sure. Can I just tease out a particular element? And that's a similar sort of thing we did in California. I was involved in the legalization in California back in 95, 96. Not to date myself, but we left ourselves with a bit of a wider scope so we could add to it, so I appreciate that. But specifically teasing out the numbers, do you have a view of what the numbers are that you expected? The reason why I was focusing on
No. Forget the numbers. I mean, these are...
As I'm sure folks can appreciate, the political nature of the bill, teasing into a lot of this, it's kind of sensitive. So on some of the conversation, Mr. Searle asked me to talk to him about it off the record, and I've done just that. So if some of this cuts back from a topic and then goes back into it, I apologize, but obviously I would gladly get any time I could to address some of these issues. So we'll pick it back up from there. Specific on baggage, and again, this is of the 11 questions, this is number 2. The bill addresses and uses the lovely words "driving under the influence" is obviously illegal. Now, as you well know, I'm sure, is that the current law doesn't address impairment. It
just simply says nothing in this bill avoids it being offence.
Yeah, but the actual sentence that's in the New South Wales book that the police go by is the program does not infer impaired driving or driving a motor vehicle under the influence of a drug. This program detects the presence of an illicit drug in the subject's oil fluid. That's almost like possession, if you like.
I think you're coming at it the wrong way. What the words in the bill say?
The actual bill says driving under the influence. That's it.
Read the whole thing.
I don't have the clause right in front of me, I'm sorry.
Well, go back to the clause. Then we can talk about it.
Okay. I'll skip it and I'll come back as I'm going through these. And again, I appreciate your time. And you can cut me off if you need to. And again, this is in your inbox too. Mr. Foley mentions crude cannabis in presenting the bill, but it's not detailed more in the bill.
No, the definitions in the bill are the definition of the bill.
Perfect.
Cannabis leaf, cannabis oil, cannabis resin.
I think you know where I'm going with this, is that the other bills all de-emphasize crude, quote-unquote, cannabis and emphasize pharmaceuticals, GMO, and even synthetics in the case of Queensland. And I'm just concerned of how you avoid that.
Let's cut you off.
Yes.
Again, it's really simple. I direct you back to the bill, to the definitions.
Which is very clean and simple.
Yeah, very simple. Plus, by regulation, you can declare something to be cannabis, or you can declare something to not be cannabis.
Perfect. Then the issue of that is there a risk, if it isn't got more meat on it, that you could have crude cannabis de-emphasized in favor of all the others that are emphasized in all the other bills, if that makes sense.
I don't quite get what you're saying.
So in all the other bills, it basically removes, it doesn't include...
No, that can't happen because you've got leaf, oil, and resin,
Yeah.
and the regulations can't detract from that.
Well, I'm trying to choose that here. Obviously, I'm assuming that because I'm aware of all the other bills, that he's aware of the detail of all the other bills, and he's not. He's purposely avoided dealing with some of the issues in all the other bills because then this bill gets weighted down. Remember, most of your other bills are hundreds of pages, and this bill is only 17 pages. So it was quite interesting how they did it to address everything that's important without addressing all the history.
Specific to the other bills, and I'm sure you're across these, it means that medicinal cannabis in Australia currently doesn't need to include cannabis.
That's not my bill. No,
Yours does, the others don't, and that's my concern.
Yeah, well, in which case my bill's obviously slipped ahead of the others.
Oh no, it is, and that's the excitement. I don't think people realize that. And again, that's the issue. Is I would predict, because of what's already gone on with government and already seeing this from other folks, is that they're going to be looking to amend the heck out of this to protect those specific interests, pharmaceuticals. And
I don't get around to ask about
Perfect.
pharmaceutical industries.
Great. What about specifically the impact it might have, for instance, here in Victoria, which is a Labour state? Does that have any impact on what you're doing there?
No, nothing. Obviously, we're all moving in the same direction. But Victoria at the moment is limited to. It's very circumscribed. Ours is very New South Wales specific.
Yes.
Carers and sufferers have to be ordinarily resident in New South Wales.
Hi, this is Lauren back again. So that's the end of part one. We'll kick back in for the rest of this. Again, I understand what I'm asking, but obviously my view and insight is sometimes skewed by what theirs is, so I do apologize for some of the cross meanings and addressing on some of this, but I think it shows an awful lot of information and hopefully helps clarify some elements of the bill, but obviously it's not the be-all and end-all of all the answers, and I do appreciate that. We'll go ahead and go back here to part two now.
So I cut out there because that's where he had to leave, go to his next meeting, and we're back into this, and there'll be another cut, I think, in this one where he wants another part of it off the record. And I'll tease out some more of what we're talking about here. Here we go into part two.
Okay, so as we jump in here to part two, again, I scramble as always, but somebody phones you and you're trying to get the interview going, you're not sitting there waiting for a microphone to be ready, so it's always a bit of a scramble when they phone you, and all of a sudden you've got to get your recording set up, so I've missed a second or two. When I started the conversation here on part two, Mr. Searle just mentioned that he wanted to get support from the community, so that's where we're kind of kicking in now. Well, I was gonna finish with that in terms of what can the community do to help you with the bill. So I guess you just answered that, is basically get in touch with the local MPs to say yes, please.
Yes, please. You're going to see the local member rights of them. You know, there's nothing like face-to-face contact as you would appreciate.
Sure.
It's very easy for a politician to simply write back no, or to get their staff to do it, or simply not respond. It's very hard to sit across from a parent whose children are suffering terrible pain and tell them you're not going to do anything about this matter.
Well, that's it. So, quickly catching up, one of the last things we talked about, you deferred me back to the bill specifically when I was asking you about the driving laws.
Yeah.
So the way it's written in the bill, nothing in this section excuses a registered medicinal user for any driving or other offense committed while under the influence of cannabis.
That's right.
So,
Pause there. If there is an offence somewhere, this bill doesn't excuse you from it.
so currently, as you,
It doesn't say there is an offence. It just says if there is, this bill doesn't get you off the hook.
sure. So as you know, the whole idea of the oil tests being the sole determination of unlawful driving when it may not have anything to do with impairment for days. So somebody may not have medicated for days, but they still may test positive in an oral exam. This doesn't do anything to address that?
No, it doesn't. It simply just says, effectively it says nothing in this bill impinges on those other laws.
Okay,
One way or another.
I understand.
It doesn't criminalise anything. It doesn't decriminalise it. It doesn't provide you with a defence if you get pulled over and, you know, someone alleges you are driving under the influence. It doesn't provide you with a defence, but it doesn't also criminalise it.
Yeah, I mean, you see where I'm going is that the law is a bit unique in Australia in that you can't use those oral exams anywhere else in the world but Australia because it's got nothing to do with impairment. It's only the presence in your oral fluids in this case.
That's right.
Okay, so there's nothing there that fixes anything. And I guess that's what I'm trying to tease out, whether or not anything gets fixed by default through the process, that's all.
No, I'm not really interested in addressing that.
Okay, I understand.
Addressing this one was the core business of the bill.
Sure. This goes back to, the baggage that it addresses and its subtleness as opposed to addressing baggage that isn't quite so subtle.
What that waffle really is about is that in the bill it's written that driving under the influence is not legal. But the current law is not about driving under the influence or being impaired. It's about almost possession, having it in your system. And you'll hear why my concerns are raised.
It's more about avoiding an allegation. Someone goes, oh, is it better if you're on medicinal cannabis, you can drive? And you just go, see this bit of the bill? If there's a problem with that, this bill doesn't get you off the hook.
Part of the reason why I address that is through my own consultancy up here in Victoria, the Undersecretary of Health here, who of course is the other party, because we're a Labor state, she said that the intention of government was to prevent anybody ever driving, should they ever be using medicinal cannabis, basically effectively giving up their driver's license regardless of impairment. And I was just kind of teasing around whether or not any of this might get fixed because of that, but as you said, that's not the intent.
That's not the intention.
So again, I'll flog this dead horse just a little bit more because it's an important one. In the views of government, they have said that should anybody ever be able to get legal medicinal cannabis, not foreseeing where we are with the Foley bill, but should anybody ever get there, the view was from government is they're going to have to get their driver's licenses. This then goes back to the point, well, if it's not about impairment and it's only about position in your system, then why are they doing this? And this is the purpose of why I was trying to tease this out.
Okay. Supply. What is the impact, do you believe, in this on supply? If somebody's registering, meets the criteria, for them to actually access any sort of supply? Because supply is a big issue here, of course.
Yeah, well, first of all, in the like the Legislative Council select, well, the inquiry that I was part of in 2013, we deliberately did not address the issue of supply because it was very complicated and we didn't have sufficient time. So effectively, what the model we proposed was one where it decriminalised possession and use, but did not decriminalise the supply, because we formed the view that really anybody who wants to get this stuff in Sydney probably can.
Sure.
I don't think most places in the state it's probably not a big issue, although having illegal supply is obviously not desirable in the long term. So that's where we start. The bill would decriminalise use and possession, and in the case of carers, limited supply, but it doesn't do anything about the dealer. But what we do is we create a mechanism by which the state itself can create a lawful supply chain.
Right.
Now, the mechanism of the bill, I think, is sufficiently flexible to go from everything from the state doing it itself to licensing private providers to do it,
From industry.
or even permitting people who are sufferers from doing it
Self-growth.
for themselves. So it's quite a wide, flexible tool in the bill. Last year, the Parliament legislated for coffee production in New South Wales, using a sort of similar model of licenses and permits. So the answer is there is no immediate issue about supply, other than to create a mechanism by which you can either import it or grow and produce it here.
So the bill almost acts like a hub to allow other elements to plug into it, with this as kind of being the initial framework of the hub for the other bits to kind of help fix that.
The bill doesn't specify how you would create that supply chain. That would be a matter for subsequent action by government through regulation.
Because then this bill could get too burdened down with the devil of the detail then.
Well, the fact is, when you look at the Victoria and Queensland legislation, it's hundreds of pages.
Yes.
And I just thought, no, we're the opposition, we're not yet the government. We have to address the issue, but we don't have the time and to go through all of that minutiae. And, a simple, and just in terms of, and this is off the record, this bit, just in terms.
As we're coming back to this edit, so basically what he's about to say here is that supply is still illegal, but it's the framework that it opens up, and this is why it's key that you kind of really hear his words on this.
So before I cut back to that, so the important bit of this, and when you're having the interview, you don't know what you know until you're done with the interview. Then you know more than you did, obviously, when you start the interview. Otherwise, there's no point in having an interview. So what I didn't realize about the bill, and again, it comes through as you hear more the last few minutes here, is that this is an enabler bill. All it looks to do is to legalize self-grows, legalize the making of medicines, and prevent people from being able to get arrested for doing just that. Growing your own, buying it from the black market, and making your own oils and the rest of it, while the rest of it gets sorted out. And again, keeping in mind that up to this point in Australian history, there's been no legal demand for medicinal cannabis. For real cannabis, there's been no legal demand. This bill opens that up, and it changes everything. Here we go.
No, absolutely.
Supply is still illegal and it's still subject to the criminal law, but we can create our own lawful supply chain after careful negotiation with the Commonwealth, stakeholders, business, the community, medical practitioners, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, that's the next step.
Cool. Last two questions. The TICS program in New South Wales, as well as the SAS program, the Special Access Scheme, hasn't really worked at all. And part of that has been because they created enough roadblocks to make it quite difficult for sign-off to happen. Within your new bill, it obviously mentions sign-off and the rest of it. Do you foresee there not being the same sort of roadblocks to facilitate the register working?
No, because the roadblocks in the special access scheme, they're so bureaucratic, and you basically require medical practitioners to verify themselves, verify and sign off and provide evidence of efficacy.
Yes.
And that's really a critical task beyond the task of a medical practitioner and their patients. And it's a huge roadblock.
Well, doctors won't do it because they can't do it, and of course, in a lot of cases, they have to go against the AMA to do anything.
That's right. I think this bill's on a different path.
So you don't see that being a roadblock because the health secretary would be on.
Health secretary has a much simpler task to determine whether or not someone's going to have certified that they have a terminal illness, or whether they have as defined another serious illness, and then to register them. And as you can see, registration confers on those registered certain benefits and exemptions of the criminal law.
Sure. This obviously, as you mentioned, isn't your first rodeo. You've had some longevity in managing this thing from, I mean, it goes prior to 2013. I think I was seeing some of the lines. I mean, you've been dealing with this puppy for a while, haven't you?
I have. My father died of cancer in 2004. I have some experience that medicinal cannabis can be highly effective.
Yeah.
I have also had friends who have suffered, and for whom it has provided relief when other traditional medicine didn't work, or works that compromise their quality of life.
I think that makes so much difference when you know. When you know it works, you don't unsee these things, do you?
I think one of the difficulties, where the government is currently bogged down, is they're probably still in the mindset of, does this work? Which is why the former Premier, rather than doing anything, has basically commissioned a series of clinical trials.
Yes.
Whereas I and the opposition have reached a policy point where we have decided that for some people, and that's the important caveat, for some people, it does work.
Yes.
And it's not a cure, but it is a relief from pain and suffering.
No, and if people...
And so having made that policy decision, we're basically about how do you facilitate that.
Sure. As I said, there's one question, probably two, but it's 1.5. Mr. Foley mentioned on the bill presentation that it was a bipartisan bill with 5 parties. My counting shows there's only 6 parties with the main party. Do you anticipate this passing on a sort of a 58, 36 sort of number, or at least passing?
No, I don't think that if I was a betting person, I would be surprised if the government supported it.
Well, that leaves them out, but they're 36 of the 58, aren't they?
Yeah, well, no, so what Mr. Foley was referring to was the Legislative Council inquiry.
Oh, I see.
In 2013, there was an upper house inquiry, and there were 5 different political parties represented on that inquiry.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's what somebody
The
suggested.
Conservative Party, the Liberal Party, the National Party, the Shooters Party, and the Greens.
So,
The recommendations of that inquiry were unanimous.
so what do you see happening? Because the next date that this is, I guess, booked to conclude the debate is end of the month on the 28th.
Well, that's where it can conclude, doesn't mean it will conclude.
Do you see them trying to defer it and keep pushing it off then?
Look, one possibility is that they will keep deferring it so that the bill is never voted on, it just lapses.
Like they did with Richard D. Natale's bill up here.
Yeah, so that may be so. But I guess what I would say about it is this. You have a bipartisan parliamentary inquiry. you have, I think, clear community support. And we have what I think is a balanced and measured bill to relieve the pain and suffering of thousands of people and their families.
Thousands of people. Thousands.
That's,
We would
Thousands.
we would advise the government to follow through on the spirit that imbued the committee and that informs the former Premier's public statements around it. And that rather than just talking about it, we take some action.
that's great, and you can't get much better than that. Last question. The reason why I knew this bill was about to be tabled was only because the health minister had put out a presser to mention that the quote-unquote first legal licenses on Australia were going to be in Victoria. That let me know something was going on because it didn't make sense. Do you see government wanting to get in the way of this because of, we kind of touched on special interests before, but do you see that being a big roadblock? Government, specifically on this?
But back to date has been a lack of courage and a lack of imagination. There's still very much, does this work? Question mark. We need to move beyond that to, we know this can work for some people. How do we make that available to them?
Sure. All right, well,
It's a clear mindset difference.
yeah. One of my booger bears, and if you Google my name and Hansard, you'd see the bill up here in Victoria that's got my name on an amendment, was around this clarity on definition. And the result of that is because of Queensland being the last bill where they included synthetics in terms of a definition of cannabis. This was what I mentioned before about medicinal cannabis in Australia doesn't need to actually have cannabis in it as a result of the baggage of all these other definitions of all the other bills in 2016. That makes it very difficult when the media is reporting anything on quote-unquote medicinal cannabis because they could be talking about synthetics or GMO or pharma or CBD, anything other than, as you put in your definition, cannabis leaf. It doesn't, yeah. How do you see that being fixed, or do you see it not being an issue? Because I keep trying to correct the media, when they're saying, they'll mix up in a claim, they'll say, little Johnny did good on medicinal cannabis. And I'll use Lucy as an example. Unfortunately she's helped push this, but little Johnny's done really good on medicinal cannabis, so we're going to make sure they don't have to deal with that again. We're going to make it legal. Here's a pill, and that pill may have no cannabis in it whatsoever. That's a problem we've got every day in the media here. I don't know how we tackle that baggage. You don't have to tackle it in your bill, but the rest of us have to tackle it in trying to get facts out there.
Yeah, I guess the answer is this, that, you can have pharmaceutical products derived from the chemical, the active ingredients.
Of course.
And that, that's obviously a form of pharmaceutical product. And I have to say myself, I'm not opposed to that because, certainly when I was on the inquiry, a lot of the evidence we received from, otherwise glorifying middle class people was that in an ideal world, they would like to buy a spray, a tincture, or a tablet.
Sure.
But they didn't want to have to go and buy some dope.
But where I'm saying that if somebody's benefiting from medicinal cannabis and that's worked, for them to potentially not have the option because they're being forced to take this alternative, that's what I'm talking about. Not choice, but alternative forced.
Yeah. Well, our bill provides, it doesn't preclude the possibility
No.
of pharmaceutical products being declared medicinal cannabis for the purpose of the bill, but it also makes it clear that it's actual cannabis that can be used.
Yeah. Great. Well, I've taken up enough of your time. Anything else you want to get out on any of this? Obviously, I'll be putting it back to the community do what they do and try and get in front of their local MPs up there in New South Wales. I'm down here in Victoria, but.
I think that's the case. As many people who care about this to get in front of their local member of parliament.
Great. All right. Will you guys be putting out any more pressers on this, just so that people are more aware of this, or do you?
Basically, his answer was yes. They plan to do some more pressers because I'm aware that the media has not jumped full board into this either. Keep in mind, if government doesn't want the message out there, industry doesn't want it out there, a lot of the activists don't want it out there, it's not going to get out there so much. So we'll see how popular it becomes. If there is community support, folks could have legal cannabis voted on the 28th of March and very quickly thereafter be legal. So it's a wonderful time. If it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. But you know what? There's a lot of people besides myself that would like to see people in New South Wales, prefer it down here in Victoria, but we'd like to see the people up in New South Wales. Doesn't matter if they're first, they get legal cannabis. It helps the rest of us. It validates the demand for legal cannabis in Australia, not to mention legalizing it and allowing grow your own and make your own for thousands in Australia. And otherwise, how do you tell the Michael Oakleys of this world that you could have Ben could be able to make his medicine and buy his medicine and buy product to make his medicine, and his carriers could supply the medicine legally and the rest of it, and folks just need to get in front of their MPs, email their MPs, go see their local MPs and say, it's time. We need to be able to do this. So hopefully that helps a little bit and answers a couple of questions that were out there. I'll put up all the Foley information back out there. But if you believe in the bill and you believe that thousands of people that have serious illnesses, chronic pain, and the rest of it should be able to have legal cannabis for the first time in Australia, in New South Wales, and then beyond, the bill is very simple. The bottom line of it is it doesn't fix and it doesn't burden all the other bills in Australia that I've been whinging about and others have for the last year and a half. It basically says you can do anything you want to with all that. But by the way, if you have these serious conditions, which are a larger list, then you can grow your own. You can buy your own. You can make your own. Your carers can get involved and help as well. And that validates demand. And this is where things start, folks. This is what it's all about. So it doesn't get burdened down by the other bills, 17 pages long. That's what it's all about. And let's hope folks get behind it. So look forward to you out there, and thanks a lot for your attention. Have a good day.